The low amber light of the restaurant made the ice in my glass glow. Outside, the city of Chicago was a blur of headlights and noise. But in here, there was only a quiet hum of conversation and the gentle clink of silverware on porcelain. I was perfectly still, a predator waiting for its prey. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. That part of me was gone now, burned away by the fire of the last few weeks. Across the table, a young woman nervously shredded a cocktail napkin. I glanced at the door, then back at her. My voice was low, a calm, steady instrument. He's here. But that was later. Much later. Before the fire. Before the ice. My world was built on logic and control. My office was on the 35th floor, encased in glass, overlooking the steady, indifferent flow of the Chicago River. I was Eliza Vance, and my kingdom was a grid of spreadsheets, contracts, and timelines. At 35, I was the co-founder and chief operating officer of Vance and Dawson Events, one of the most sought-after event planning firms in the city. My husband, Mark Dawson, was the other half of the name on the door. He was the finance guy, the charmer who brought in the big clients. I was the architect, the one who made sure the beautiful dreams he sold didn't collapse into a logistical nightmare. Our lives, like our business, were a perfectly balanced partnership. At least, that's what I told myself. That afternoon, my focus was absolute. I was dissecting a vendor contract for a high-profile political fundraiser, my pen hovering over a clause with dangerously ambiguous language. The details were everything. They were the foundation of order. The sharp ring of my desk phone was a violation. A crack in the silence. I snatched it up. My voice clipped. Eliza Vance. It was an emergency. Of course. It was always an emergency. A problem at the Adler Planetarium. Our venue for the fundraiser. Structural permits. Catering disputes as the usual brand of chaos that only my presence could tame. I sighed, my mind already shifting gears from legal jargon to crisis management. The fundraiser was this weekend. Failure wasn't an option. It never was. I saved my work, shut down my computer, and grabbed my blazer. My life was a series of fires to be put out, and I was the best firefighter I knew. Stepping out of the climate-controlled stillness of our building and into the thick, humid air of a Chicago August was a physical shock. The sun beat down on the pavement, and the city hummed with a restless energy. My mind was still 1,000 miles away, running through contingency plans. I walked briskly down Wacker Drive, the sharp click of my heels a metronome marking my urgent pace. And then I saw him. Across the street, something made me stop dead, as if I'd run into an invisible wall. The air rushed out of my lungs in a single, silent gasp, emerging from the gleaming glass doors of Equinox. The most expensive gym in the neighborhood was Mark. My husband, the man who had kissed my forehead that very morning, his voice thick with sleep, and sworn he'd be chained to his home office all day, drowning in financial reports for the very fundraiser I was now racing to save. He yawned dramatically, claiming the workload was so immense he wouldn't even bother to change out of his sweatpants. And yet, there he was, in the heart of the bustling loop, wearing new compression shorts and a fitted tank top I'd never seen before. His hair was damp with sweat, his skin glowing with the satisfying flush of a hard workout. He didn't look like a man who'd spent the morning staring at numbers. He looked revitalized. He looked alive, like a man who had just shed a great weight. The initial shock, a sharp sting of irritation at the pointless would have been manageable. I was a pragmatist. Maybe he needed a break, an escape from the crushing routine. I could have understood that. But the real blow, the image that made my heart plummet into the pit of my stomach, wasn't his presence. It was his company. Mark was not alone. Walking beside him, with the easy grace of someone who believed the world was hers for the taking, was a young woman. She couldn't have been older than 23. Her face was flushed, her high ponytail bouncing with each step. She had a bright, effortless smile, the kind that seemed to light up everything around her. And her eyes sparkled as she said something that made Mark laugh. It was a real laugh, a loud, uninhibited sound that I hadn't heard from him in years. He ran a hand through his damp hair, a gesture that was almost boyish. A piece of blatant flirtation. He seemed to have forgotten how to perform in my presence. He wasn't just a man talking to a friend. He was a peacock, fanning his feathers. He was enchanted, captivated, completely absorbed in the private universe they had created on that crowded sidewalk. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. The meeting, the venue inspection, The urgent problems at the planetarium all dissolved into a distant, meaningless fog. There was only this scene, unfolding in agonizing slow motion across the street. A disturbing truth I had been pushing to the back of my mind for months began to surface, with devastating force. The late nights he blamed on work, the new workout clothes that kept appearing in his drawers, the excessive time he spent on his phone, smiling at the screen and brushing me off when I asked, "It's just a guy's group chat, Eli. Nothing important," he would say. And I, the logical, rational woman, chose to believe him, because the alternative was an earthquake beneath the foundations I believed were solid rock. An ancient, primal instinct took over, a visceral need to know, to understand. Without thinking, I slipped behind the metal frame of a newspaper stand, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to see where this went. I had to follow them. This was a movie I never wanted to see, a story I never wanted to be a part of. But I had just unknowingly bought a front row ticket, the unlikely pair across the street. Their closeness speaking of a shared intimacy. They laughed at something he whispered in her ear. They didn't go far. They turned into a trendy cafe, a vibrant, colorful place famous for its ridiculously overpriced acai bowls, loaded with toppings that made a mockery of any calories burned at the gym. A place Mark, with his sudden and intense focus on clean living, should have avoided like the plague. I watched from the shadowed safety of a bus shelter across the street, as they chose a small table by the window. The view was clear, unforgiving. They didn't sit across from each other, like colleagues or casual friends might. They sat side by side, their shoulders nearly touching, a proximity that screamed complicity. Their order arrived. A single, enormous bowl of acai, overflowing with granola, fruit, coconut flakes, and a generous drizzle of honey. It came with 2 spoons. The sight of her dipping her spoon into the bowl and bringing it to her lips, followed by him doing the exact same thing, was like a punch to the gut. It was a couple's ritual, a ritual that had once belonged to him and me. Back in the early days of our relationship, now being desecrated with a stranger. He laughed when she got a smudge of purple on her nose, and he didn't tell her about it. He just watched her with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. The man in that cafe was not the Mark Dawson who shared a mortgage and a bed with me. My Mark, the man at home, was increasingly quiet, perpetually tired. He came home from work, collapsed on the sofa, and stared blankly at the television, responding to my questions in monosyllables. His energy always seemed to be drained by the responsibilities of our adult lives. But this Mark, the man sharing an acai bowl, was light. He was boyish. He was effervescent. His eyes shone with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in a decade. He gestured animatedly, telling stories that made her laugh, leaning in close to her, absorbing her every word. He looked like he had rediscovered a lost piece of his youth, a version of himself I thought had been buried under the weight of invoices, contracts, and 15 years of marriage. The pain that hit me wasn't just betrayal. It was grief. The grief of realizing that this vibrant man still existed. He just wasn't for me anymore. He was saving him for someone else. My hands were trembling as I reached for my phone. Logic, my lifelong companion, screamed at me to walk away, to stop torturing myself. But my heart, that treacherous, masochistic organ, needed one final confirmation. It needed the nail in the coffin of my peace of mind. My fingers flew across the screen, typing a message that was both a test and a trap. Hey, how are the reports coming along? Need them by end of day to finalize the budget for the gala. I pressed send and looked up, my gaze fixed on their table. I saw his phone vibrate on the wood. I saw Mark pick it up, the smile vanishing from his face to be replaced by a flash of pure annoyance. He didn't text back. He just flipped the phone over, screen down. A gesture of dismissal. A gesture that said, "You are not important right now." I took a sharp breath, the air scraping my throat. I needed more. I needed to hear it. I dialed his number. The contact name, Mark, glowed on my screen. Across the street, his phone lit up again. In front of her, without a shred of hesitation, he pressed the red button on the side of his phone, silencing my call, rejecting me. Then, as a final, brutal act of cruelty, I watched him hold the power button down and turn the device off completely. My world went silent. He wasn't just hiding something from me. He was actively, consciously choosing his other life over ours. In that instant, the ground I had always believed to be solid concrete revealed itself to be quicksand. and I was sinking. The night descended on Chicago, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and deep indigo. But for me, the darkness had arrived much earlier. On that sun-drenched sidewalk in the Loop, the drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic on Lakeshore Drive, the stoplights, the familiar turns into our neighborhood. My mind was a private theater, replaying the same scene on an endless loop. Mark rejecting my call, turning off his phone, choosing his world with her over our world together. When I turned the key in the lock of our spacious, elegantly decorated condo in Lincoln Park, the place we called home, a heavy silence greeted me. It was a silence that once meant peace, a sanctuary from the city's noise. Now it felt hollow, complicit in a grand deception. Every object, every piece of furniture, every framed photograph seemed to mock me. The wedding photo on the mantelpiece, the two of us beaming, young and full of promises. The picture from our trip to Italy, his arms around me in front of the Colosseum. They were relics of a life I now suspected had only ever truly existed for me. I needed to compose myself. The Eliza who managed crises, the woman who solved intractable problems, had to take control. I took a long, cold shower, trying to wash away not just the grime of the day, but the sticky, suffocating feeling of deceit that clung to my skin. I changed into comfortable loungewear, made myself a cup of chamomile tea that tasted like ash, and sat on the sofa, rehearsing normalcy. I would not confront him. Not yet. An explosion of anger and pain would be exactly what he'd expect. Perhaps even what he wanted. It would cast him as the victim of a jealous, hysterical wife. No, I wouldn't give him that weapon. I would be the lead actress in my own play. And from this moment on, I would be the one writing the script. Hours later, when I heard his key in the door, my entire body tensed, but my face remained a mask of weary serenity. Mark walked in, and his performance was worthy of an award. He was wearing the same faded band t-shirt and worn-out sweatpants he always wore at home. His hair, once damp with sweat from the gym, was now dry and slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration while staring at a computer screen. He carried an air of studied exhaustion, the martyr of the home office. "Hey, Eli," he said, his voice a practiced, tired drawl. He moved to kiss me, but in a subtle, calculated movement. I turned my head. His lips found my cheek. A brief, cool contact. "Tough day?" I asked, my tone neutral, almost disinterested. He sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation, dropping his briefcase onto an armchair. "You have no idea. Those quarterly reports are endless. Staring at spreadsheets all day just fries your brain. I think my eyes are permanently square." He walked to the kitchen, opened the stainless steel refrigerator, and pulled out a beer. He did it all with the practiced ease of a man following a routine he performed for years. The naturalness of it was the most sickening part. The lie wasn't an effort for him. It was a second skin. I watched him, my gaze analytical, dissecting his every move. "I tried calling you earlier," I said, my voice casual, as if it were a passing thought. "Needed a number for the planetarium meeting." He took a long swallow of his beer before answering, buying himself time. "Oh, yeah, I saw that. Sorry, babe." The phone died right in the middle of everything. I was so deep in the numbers, I didn't even notice. Forgot to plug it in this morning. Only saw your missed call when I finally powered it back on a little while ago. The excuse was so flimsy, so insultingly simple, that I felt an almost uncontrollable urge to laugh. The dead battery. The oldest, most pathetic lie in the book. But I just nodded. "It happens. Did you get it all done? At least?" He smiled, a flicker of relief that I had swallowed the bait so easily. "Most of it. I'll wrap up the last few things tomorrow. But that's enough work for one day. What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. A gesture that once felt like a safe harbor but now felt like the coils of a snake. I could smell him. It wasn't his familiar soap or the faint scent of his cologne. It was something else. A sweeter, almost floral perfume mixed with the lingering odor of sweat and fruit. The sickly sweet scent of acai was embedded in his skin. It was the olfactory proof, the confirmation I hadn't asked for, but which hit me with the force of a slap. I gently disentangled myself from his embrace. I ordered pizza. Didn't have time to cook. It was a busy day for me, too. In the days that followed, I became an observer, a silent spectator in my own life. And what I observed was the meticulous construction of a new man. Mark, who used to complain that the gym was monotonous, now went every single day with an infectious enthusiasm. He bought new workout gear, brightly colored running shoes, a sleek smartwatch that tracked his heart rate. He started spending more time in front of the mirror, styling his hair, trying new grooming products. He was rejuvenating himself, reinventing himself. But it wasn't for me. When I asked him about this newfound dedication, feigning admiration, he replied with a glint in his eye. You know, Eli, I decided I need to take better care of myself. Get back in shape. It's good for my head, too. Burns off all the stress from work. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. The stress he was burning off had a name, an age, and an effortless smile. I pretended to believe him. I encouraged him. I praised him. I'm so happy for you. Honey, you look great. So much more energetic. Every word of support was a small piece of my soul breaking off. But I knew I had to maintain the charade. Trust, that delicate, transparent structure, was already shattered. Now, with every new lie, every flimsy excuse, the cracks widened, threatening to bring the whole building down. I couldn't live in the suffocating fog of doubt any longer. I needed certainty, no matter how painful it might be. The decision was made in the dead of a sleepless night, while Mark slept beside me, breathing the peaceful, even breaths of a man without a care in the world. That sound now grated on my nerves like the purr of a traitor. I slipped out of bed and went into the living room, my phone in my hand. The first text was to Sarah, my best friend, a sharp, pragmatic family law attorney who had seen the ugliest sides of love and marriage. Sarah, I need your help. I think Mark is cheating on me. The reply came minutes later, short and to the point. Think, or no. I told her everything. The scene on the street, the acai bowl, the rejected call, the lies. Sarah didn't offer empty platitudes or comforting words. She offered a solution. There are ways to know for sure, Eliza, but you have to be prepared for what you'll find. The truth is often uglier than you can imagine. I was prepared. I was determined to rip the veil of ignorance away, no matter how terrifying the face behind it might be. The next morning, following Sarah's precise, legally gray instructions, I waited for Mark to leave for his early morning run. My heart was in my throat as I picked up his phone from the nightstand, where it was charging. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. Unlocking it was disturbingly easy. The passcode was the date of our first kiss. Another stab of bitter irony. In less than 2 minutes, a silent, invisible piece of spyware was installed. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, my heart hammering in my chest. The act felt like a violation, a betrayal in itself. But how do you betray a betrayer? This was self-defense. The wait was torture. For 2 days, there was nothing. His messages were mundane work groups, fantasy football trash talk. I started to question myself. Had I imagined it all? Had it been a casual meeting? An innocent friendship? The doubt, planted by 15 years of love and partnership, was a stubborn, persistent weed. But on the third night, the notification pinged on my laptop, which was now mirroring his phone. A new text thread from an unsaved number. The contact name was simply Chloe. And what I read next made the world stop turning. The words from Mark, written in a passionate, almost sappy tone I didn't recognize, painted a parallel reality, a grotesque fiction where I was a villain. Chloe, thinking of you. Today was amazing. Mark, not as amazing as you. My star. Can't stop thinking about you either. Counting the seconds until I can see you again. Chloe, me too. My handsome man. But, how are things on your end? Any news? And then, Mark Dawson's masterpiece of manipulation unfolded in all its sordid glory. Mark, same old story. My love. You know I don't really live with Eliza anymore. Our marriage has been over for a long time. We're separated. Just living under the same roof for bureaucratic reasons. And I have to provide support because she has some pretty complicated health issues. You know, I can't just abandon her completely. My conscience won't let me. I read the message once, twice, 3 times. Complicated health issues. I was the healthiest person I knew. Separated. We had slept in the same bed the night before. The lie was so elaborate, so cruel. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was rewriting our history, twisting me into a sick, dependent ex-wife to justify his own despicable behavior. The conversation continued. Mark, plus, we have the business together. Untangling that is a legal nightmare. It ties me to her in ways you can't imagine. But none of that matters. You're my present and my future. You're the light that showed up to pull me out of all this darkness. I felt my eyes burn. But the tears weren't from sadness. They were from fury. A pure, incandescent rage that incinerated the pain and forged it into a cold, hard resolve. He had built a castle of lies, and I was going to tear it down with my bare hands, brick by brick, until nothing was left but the raw, ugly truth. And the worst part, the part that made me tremble with anger, was that the girl, Chloe, believed him. She was the heroine of the story, rescuing a good man from a broken marriage to a sick, problematic wife. In that moment, I understood. My fight wasn't just with Mark anymore. It was a fight to reclaim my own identity, my own story, which was being stolen and twisted by the man I had once loved. The fury that ignited in my veins at night didn't burn out by morning. Instead, it settled deep in my chest, cooling into a sharp, pointed shard of ice. The pain was still there, a low, constant hum beneath the surface. But the raw humiliation of being portrayed as a fragile invalid at charity case in my own husband's life overwhelmed every other emotion. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had stripped me of my strength, my identity, to seduce someone else. He had turned me into a pathetic character in his private soap opera. And the other woman, this Chloe, was a captivated audience applauding his heroic performance. For days, I lived a double life. To Mark, I was the same wife as always, perhaps a little quieter, which he conveniently attributed to work stress. To myself, in the silence of my office or the long hours of the night, I was a strategist. I read and reread their conversations. Every my handsome man, every my star, every promise of a future together, made the disgust solidify into resolution. I couldn't just confront him. A burst of rage would be dismissed as hysteria. Presenting him with printouts of the text would be effective, but it would leave the other party, deceived young woman, in the role of the innocent victim, who knew nothing. And that I could not allow. The truth needed to be a bomb with a triple impact, hitting Mark, enlightening Chloe, and above all, liberating me. The decision to find Chloe wasn't easy. It required me to swallow my pride, to place myself in a position of vulnerability. It meant facing the woman who, knowingly or not, was the pivot point of my pain. But the need to dismantle Mark's carefully constructed narrative was greater than my fear. Through their text messages, I discovered where she worked, a small marketing agency in the West Loop. It wasn't hard to find her social media profile from there. It was public, filled with smiling photos, trips with friends, and, of course, selfies at the gym. She seemed like a normal, vibrant girl, the kind of person who wouldn't knowingly get involved with a married man. Or maybe, I thought with a cold shiver, she was an even better actor than Mark. It didn't matter. I had to know. One afternoon, using the excuse of an off-site client meeting, I drove to her agency. Sitting in my car across the street, I waited. Anxiety was a tight knot in my stomach. What would I even say? How do you approach a complete stranger to tell her, the man you think is your Prince Charming is my husband and a pathological liar? The situation was so absurd it felt like something out of a bad movie. When Chloe walked out of the building, laughing into her phone, my heart leaped. It was her. The same vibrant energy. The same easy smile. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I got out of the car and walked towards her. "Chloe," I called out, my voice firmer than I expected. The young woman turned, surprised, her smile fading as she saw the serious face of a woman she didn't recognize. "Yes. Do I know you?" I felt the curious glances of passers-by. "My name is Eliza Vance," I said, my voice even. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I really need to talk to you. It's about Mark Dawson." His name hung in the air between us. Chloe's expression shifted instantly. Surprise gave way to a defensive suspicion. "Mark? What about him? Who are you?" Her posture was that of someone bracing for a fight. "I'm his wife," I said. The words came out flat, devoid of emotion. I saw the shock in her eyes, quickly followed by a spark of derision. "His ex-wife? You mean?" She corrected me. "Look, I don't know what you want, but Mark has explained the whole situation to me. I'm really sorry for your problems, but what he and I have is something else." Her words, the parroting of Mark's lies, hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Problems? What problems?" I asked, my voice cutting through the air. Chloe hesitated, looking visibly uncomfortable. Look, I don't want to be indelicate, your health issues. He told me your marriage was over a long time ago, that you don't even really live together anymore. He said he's just providing support because of that. And the business. It was there, on that busy sidewalk, under the harsh afternoon sun, that Mark Dawson's house of cards began to wobble. I let out a laugh. It was a bitter, joyless sound. Health issues. Living separately. Chloe. I slept in the same bed with him last night. I made his coffee this morning. I am the co-founder and coup of the company he works for. I'm as healthy as a horse. The only sickness in this story is his pathological need to lie. The conviction in my voice. The complete absence of drama. The cold, hard clarity of my statements had all chipped away at Chloe's confident facade. The young woman looked me up and down, as if seeing me for the first time. She saw an elegant, powerful woman who looked nothing like the fragile, sick figure Mark had painted. Doubt began to blossom in her eyes. That can't be true. She stammered. He wouldn't lie to me like that. He wouldn't lie. I repeated, my voice laced with painful irony. He lies to me every day. He lies about where he goes, who he's with, what he does. Why would you be the exception? He told you I'm a pathetic charity case so you would feel like his savior. He told me he goes to the gym to relieve stress when he was really going to meet you. My hands were steady as I opened my purse and took out my phone. I didn't need to show her the text messages. I just opened my photo gallery. The first picture was a selfie of Mark and me, taken just last weekend at a family brunch. Both of us smiling. His arm slung casually around my shoulders. The second was a photo of the interior of our Condor king-sized bed. Perfectly made. The decor that was a blend of both our tastes. This is our home, where he slept last night. I swiped to the next photo, the one from our wedding. And this, I said softly, was the promise he broke. With me. And apparently, with you too. Chloe stared at the photos, her face growing paler with each image. The truth was hitting her in waves, drowning the romantic fantasy she had been living. The pieces were clicking into place. The calls he never answered when he was supposedly at home. The weekends he could never spend entirely with her. The vague excuses. It all made a sickening kind of sense now. She wasn't the heroine. She was just the other woman. The fool. Tears welled in her eyes. Tears of humiliation and anger. Oh my God. I can't believe it. I can't believe I was so stupid. He swore to me. He swore he was getting a divorce. That it was just a matter of time. He made me believe I was his future. In that moment, something shifted in the dynamic between us. The rivalry. The suspicion. It all melted away, replaced by a dark, mutual understanding. We were both victims of the same man, of the same manipulative ego. I looked at the young woman crying in front of me and felt no triumph. I felt a surprising pang of empathy. You weren't stupid, Chloe, I said, my voice softening slightly. You were deceived. He's a professional. He lies like he breathes. This isn't your fault. It's his. She looked up, her face streaked with mascara. So what do we do now? The question wasn't a plea for advice. It was a call to action. Our shared pain had forged an unlikely alliance. It was then that I realized the game had changed in a way I hadn't anticipated. I was no longer alone in my quest for justice. Now, I said, my voice gaining a new strength, a new determination. We show him what happens when two women he underestimated decide to write the ending themselves. He likes theater, doesn't he? Well, we're about to give him a show he will never forget. Chloe, feeling used and betrayed in her most genuine emotions, wiped her tears away. The sadness in her eyes was replaced by a flickering flame of indignation. She nodded, a silent pact forming between us. The plan began to take shape in my mind. No longer a simple act of revenge, but an elaborate production. A final act where the masks would fall, and the director of the farce would be forced to face his audience with no script, no exit. Under the harsh, unforgiving lights of the truth he had tried so hard to hide, the pact sealed on that sidewalk wasn't cemented with words, but with a shared look of grim understanding. Two women from different worlds and different generations, united by the same deception, the same manipulation. Chloe's raw, visceral sadness quickly morphed into a cold anger, mirroring my own transformation. We were no longer rivals circling each other with suspicion. We were allies in a war we hadn't chosen but were now determined to win. Our next meeting took place in a quiet, discreet coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. There, The full, ugly story was laid out on the table between us. With surgical calmness, I detailed my 15-year marriage, our business partnership, the web of small lies that had culminated in this grand farce. Chloe, in turn, told her version. She spoke of the charming, attentive man she'd met at the gym, the one who had pursued her relentlessly, making her feel like the most special person in the world. She recounted how he had woven a narrative of heroism around himself, casting her as the light at the end of his tunnel, the savior of a good man trapped in a failed marriage to a sick, difficult wife. Each shared detail was another nail in the coffin of Mark's character. He wasn't just an adulterer. He was an architect of alternate realities, an emotional predator who fed on the good faith of others. He told me you had a rare, degenerative condition, Chloe confessed, her voice low with shame. He said that's why he couldn't just leave, that he had to make sure you were taken care of, that you had all the support you needed. He used your supposed fragility to make me admire him even more. What kind of monster does that? I listened to every word, a new layer of ice forming around my heart. His audacity was limitless. He hadn't just cheated. He had used an imaginary illness as his alibi, weaponizing another woman's compassion as a tool for his own selfish pleasure. This wasn't a slip-up, a mistake made in a moment of weakness. This was calculated cruelty, the kind of monster who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. I answered, my voice devoid of all emotion. The kind who underestimates the women he gets involved with. And that is exactly where he's going to fall. The plan wasn't conceived in a fit of rage. It was constructed with the precision of an engineering project. It was theater, as I had predicted. But now it had to lead actresses in a flawless script. Chloe, despite her pain, proved to be a formidable partner. Her heartbreak had converted into a burning desire to unmask him, to rip away the persona of the man who had made a fool of her. The first phase of the plan was the most difficult for both of us, maintain normalcy. I continued my role as a dedicated, if slightly distant, wife. Every smile I offered Mark, every gesture of affection, required a Herculean effort. I would listen to his excuses for his late nights, his stories about the stress of work, and I would simply nod, a vague, placid smile on my lips. Inside, I was cataloging every lie, every contradiction, like a prosecutor building her closing argument. For Chloe, the task was even more arduous. She had to continue being the adoring, trusting girlfriend. The text messages between her and Mark, now monitored by me, became part of the performance. When can I see you again? Handsome. I miss you like crazy. She would type, following the script. And he, the fish, would swallow the bait with ravenous enthusiasm. Soon. My star. I'm planning a special night for us. A night you'll never forget. His promise, read by both of us on my laptop screen, was thick with a macabre irony. It would, indeed, be a night he would never forget. The stage for the final act was chosen with care. A newly opened, upscale Italian restaurant in the West Loop. A trendy, CNBC kind of place. It was the exact spot Mark had been wanting to take Chloe to impress her. It was perfect, public, sophisticated, and, above all, neutral territory. Chloe, following our plan, made the date. Thursday at 8, she suggested, her voice sweet as honey over the phone, while I sat beside her, listening, my heart a steady, heavy drum. To celebrate our first month together, Mark agreed instantly, his voice exultant. The trap was set. That same evening at home, he announced to me with an air of feigned regret, Eli, terrible news. You know that group of investors from San Francisco? Well, they're in town unexpectedly, and they've called a last-minute dinner on Thursday. Business thing. Boring, but unavoidable. I have to go. I, who already knew about this business dinner in excruciating detail, just sighed. Oh, that's a shame. Honey, but it's okay. Work is work. I'll just catch up on some shows. The relief on his face was so palpable I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He was so secure in his world of lies, so confident in his own cleverness, that he couldn't see the walls closing in around him. Thursday arrived, charged with an almost visible electricity. Throughout the day, Chloe and I exchanged texts, finalizing the last details. There was a nervous energy in the air, the kind of anxious anticipation that precedes the opening night of a major play. At 7 o'clock, Mark began to get ready. He took a long shower, Used his best cologne, expensive one he saved for special occasions, and put on a crisp linen shirt I had given him for his birthday. He looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting his hair, a smile of eager anticipation on his face. He was the image of a man on his way to a conquest. "Don't wait up for me, babe," he said, giving me a quick peck on the forehead. "This will probably go late." "Okay. Have a good business dinner," I replied, my voice steady, my eyes meeting his in the mirror for a brief second. In that glance, there was a universe of unspoken things, a silent warning that he, in his arrogance, was utterly incapable of deciphering. The moment the front door clicked shut, the atmosphere in our condo shifted. The tension gave way to a focused calm. I didn't get dressed to compete. I got dressed for a victory. I chose a classic, impeccably tailored black dress, elegant and understated. My makeup was discreet, but I wore a dark red lipstick, a silent declaration of war. I pulled my hair back into a severe, low bun. I was not the wronged wife coming for a confrontation. I was the judge, about to read the verdict. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. The place was just as I'd imagined, low lighting, soft jazz, couples murmuring to each other over glasses of wine. The hostess greeted me with a professional smile. "A table for one?" "For two," I replied, my voice cool and even. "My friend should be here shortly. We'd like that corner table, please. The one that's a bit more private." The table was strategic, offering a clear view of the entrance and the main dining room, while being partially shielded by a pillar and a large floral arrangement. I sat down, ordered a glass of Cabernet, and waited. Every minute that ticked by stretched the cord of expectation tighter. At precisely 8 o'clock, Chloe walked in. She looked stunning. She wore a royal blue dress that highlighted her youth and a nervous smile that only I would be able to identify. She walked to my table, and her eyes met in a look of shared purpose. "He's on his way," she whispered, taking her seat. "He just texted that he's parking the car." "Good," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Remember, Chloe, no yelling, no tears. Our power is in our composure. We are in control." She took a deep breath and nodded. And then, he entered. Mark Dawson strode through the restaurant's entrance like a movie star. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his linen shirt impeccable, a confident smile on his lips. In his hand, he held a small, perfect bouquet of red roses. His eyes scanned the room, searching for Chloe. When he spotted her, his smile widened. He started walking towards our table, his stride elastic, the walk of a man who feels like the king of the world, completely oblivious to the second figure sitting in the shadows. He was just a few feet from the table, the bouquet extended, the name Chloe practically forming on his lips. When his eyes finally adjusted to the dim light, and he saw me, the smile froze on his face. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a pale mask of shock and disbelief. The bouquet of roses slipped from his paralyzed hand and fell to the floor with a soft thud, the petals scattering across the dark carpet like drops of blood. Time seemed to stop. The murmur of the restaurant, the soft music, it all faded away. There was only our frozen triangle, caught in a single, devastating moment of pure revelation. The silence that fell around our table was heavier and more suffocating than any sound. Mark's face was a blank canvas, on which panic was painting a masterpiece of pure terror. His wide eyes darted from me to Chloe, and back to me again, like a cornered animal caught between two traps. His mind, usually so quick to weave intricate lies, seemed to have short-circuited. Reality had fractured, and its two halves were sitting before him, watching him with a terrifying, unified calm. His mouth opened and closed, producing a pathetic, inaudible sound. He was a fish on dry land, gasping for an explanation that didn't exist. "Eliza, Chloe, what is this?" he finally managed to stammer. "I can explain." The universal cliché of the guilty. The phrase came out as a weak thread of sound, lost in the icy atmosphere he had single-handedly created. But the script for this evening no longer belonged to him. It was Chloe, the young woman he had molded into a credulous doll, who broke the spell first. Her voice, once sweet with admiration, was now as sharp as a shard of glass. "No, Mark, you don't get to explain anything." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his, without a single tear, only a glacial contempt. "Explain what? That your wife doesn't have a terminal illness? That you're not actually separated? That you lied to me every single day since we met? That you used me, my feelings, Just to feel young and powerful again? No. Mark. There was nothing to explain. Each question was a precise, verbal blow, methodically demolishing the facade of the honorable man he had worked so hard to build. The other patrons in the restaurant were beginning to notice. Whispers died down. Forks paused midway to mouths. Our private drama had become a public spectacle. Mark, desperate, turned his gaze to me. His eyes pleaded for some kind of mercy, perhaps even hoping for the angry outburst he knew how to handle, the one he could use to his advantage. But what he found was far worse. He found my calm. I looked at him not with the rage of a betrayed wife, but with the detached appraisal of a judge about to deliver a sentence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My presence, my intact dignity, was the most damning indictment of all. You turned our life, Mark, I said, my voice clear and cutting, each syllable carrying the weight of a stone. Our marriage, our business, you turned it all into a cheap stage play to feed your fragile ego. You made me into a sick, weak character in your little story. Well, here is your final act. The spotlight is on you, and the show is over. I made a subtle gesture with my hand, encompassing the silent restaurant, the shocked onlookers, the two women seated before him. It's over. The finality in those two words was absolute. There was no room for negotiation, for apologies, for empty promises. Under the curious gaze of dozens of strangers, Chloe and I rose from our chairs in a single, synchronized movement. I smoothed down my black dress, a figure of composure and self-possession. Chloe, standing beside me, looked as if she had aged 10 years in one night, but in her posture, there was a new and unshakable strength. We said nothing more. We simply turned our backs on him and began to walk towards the exit. Mark was left behind, a statue of public humiliation in the middle of the dining room. The fallen roses lay at his feet, their scent mixing with the expensive cologne he wore. His confident smile was frozen into a grimace of sheer panic. He was utterly alone, abandoned by the two women he had deceived, his mediocrity exposed for all to see. The murmurs in the restaurant slowly started up again, now directed entirely at him. The man left standing in the wreckage of his own making. As we walked out into the cool night air, I felt something shift inside me. A great weight I hadn't even been fully aware I was carrying had been lifted. I didn't feel triumphant, not in a celebratory way. I felt clean. I had not stooped to his level. I hadn't screamed or thrown a drink or caused a scene. I had simply held up a mirror and forced him to look at his own reflection. Chloe walked silently beside me for a block, the sounds of the city filling the space between us. Then, she stopped and turned to me. Thank you, Eliza, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I know this couldn't have been easy for you, but you didn't have to include me. You could have just handled it. He made us both characters in his story. Chloe, I replied, meeting her gaze. It was only right that we write the ending together. He counted on us being enemies. He never imagined we'd be allies. A small, sad smile touched her lips. He really doesn't know women at all. Does he? No, I said. He doesn't. We stood there for a moment longer, an unlikely pair forged in the fires of a shared betrayal. Then, with a simple nod of mutual respect, we went our separate ways into the Chicago night. I did not walk away from that restaurant a defeated woman. I did not leave as a cheated wife who made a scene. I walked away free, and beside me had walked another woman who, on that very same night, had also found her own liberation. The drive home was different this time. I was aware of everything. The lights of the skyline, the music playing softly on the radio, the steady rhythm of my own breathing. When I entered our condo, the silence no longer felt hollow. It felt peaceful. It felt like mine. I went into our bedroom, the room where he had slept beside me and lied, and opened the closet. His side was neat and orderly, a reflection of the meticulous image he projected to the world. I took out 2 large suitcases and began to pack his things. The new workout clothes, the expensive shirts, the grooming products he'd recently bought. I folded each item with a strange sense of detachment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I packed everything. I left nothing of his behind, except for the wedding photo on the mantelpiece. I left that for him to find, a final reminder of what he had so carelessly thrown away. I placed the packed suitcases neatly by the front door. Then I poured myself a glass of Wynneth good wine we were saving for a special occasion, and sat on the sofa. I was waiting for him. Not for a fight. Not for another round of lies. I was waiting to deliver the epilogue. An hour later, The key turned in the lock. Mark walked in. His face pale and drawn. He looked like a soldier returning from a lost battle. He saw the suitcases first. His shoulders slumped in defeat. He finally looked at me. His eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic hope. "Eli," he began, his voice cracking. I held up a hand, silencing him. "There's nothing left to say. Mark, your things are packed. I've already transferred a sum of money to your personal account to cover a hotel for the next few weeks. My lawyer will be in touch with yours on Monday to begin the proceedings, both for the divorce and for dissolving our business partnership." "Eliza, please," he begged, taking a step towards me. "Don't do this. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It meant nothing. I love you." The words, which once would have meant the world to me, now sounded hollow and rehearsed. "No, Mark," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a frozen lake. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You made hundreds of choices. Every lie you told me, every lie you told her, was a choice. And portraying me as a sick, dependent woman to gain her sympathy? That wasn't a mistake. That was monstrous. You don't love me. You love the idea of me, the stability I provide, the business I built. You don't get to have that anymore." He stood there, broken and speechless. The charming, confident man I had married was gone, replaced by this hollow shell. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his betrayal. "You should go," I said softly. "There's a life you built for yourself. Go live it." Without another word, he picked up his suitcases, the weight of them seeming to crush him. He didn't look at me as he opened the door and walked out of my life. The click of the lock behind him was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my future beginning. Mark's departure wasn't a sudden, violent storm. It was the quiet, eerie calm that follows one. The silence in the condo was no longer a weapon against me. It was a space I could finally fill with my own thoughts, my own breath. For the first few days, I moved through the rooms like an archaeologist exploring a newly discovered ruin. I saw the ghost of our life everywhere, the indentation on his side of the bed, the coffee mug he always used still in the drying rack, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the closet. But these ghosts didn't haunt me. They were simply artifacts of a past civilization, one that had crumbled under the weight of its own lies. The calls and texts started on the second day. At first, they were a frantic barrage. Dozens of missed calls. A flood of messages that swung wildly between desperate apologies and angry accusations. "Eli, please, we have to talk. This is our whole life we're throwing away. You can't just kick me out. We built this together. I was an idiot. I know that now. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit the gym. Just let me come home. How could you team up with her? It's sick. Eliza, you've always been so cold." I read them all with a clinical detachment, like a scientist studying the erratic behavior of a specimen under a microscope. His words had lost their power over me. They were just noise. The last desperate gasps of a man who had lost control of the narrative. I never replied. My silence was a wall he could not breach. Sarah, my rock, was my first and only call. I told her everything that had happened, from the restaurant to the packed suitcases. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke. "Damn, Eliza," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm a divorce lawyer, and even I'm impressed. No screaming. No drama. Just a cold, clean amputation. I'm proud of you. I just wanted it to be over." I confessed, the exhaustion finally seeping into my voice. "This is the beginning, not the end." She corrected me gently. "Now the real work starts. The divorce is one thing. Untangling the business is another. He's not going to make it easy." She was right. The moment Mark realized his pleas were falling on deaf ears, his strategy shifted. He lawyered up, and the first letters that arrived were not conciliatory. They were aggressive. He argued that as a primary rainmaker, the one who charmed clients and brought in the business, he was entitled to a majority stake. He claimed my operational role was secondary, easily replaceable. It was a declaration of war, an attempt to diminish my contribution, to erase my half of our shared history once again. This was the battleground where I was strongest. He had underestimated me in our marriage, and now he was underestimating me in our business. The pain of the personal betrayal had been sharp and deep, but this professional assault ignited a different kind of fire in me, cold, focused fury. Vance and Dawson Events wasn't just a company to me. It was a physical manifestation of a decade and a half of my life, of my late nights, my strategic thinking, my relentless pursuit of perfection. He would not take it from me. I met with Sarah and my corporate lawyer, laying out every document, every email, every contract that proved my integral role. I had been the architect of our success, designing the very systems that allowed his charm to flourish. I had negotiated the deals he brought in, managed the teams that executed them, and salvaged the projects his carelessness nearly derailed. I had the receipts, literally and figuratively. The fight for the company became my focus, my purpose. It consumed my days and nights, leaving little room for grief. Work was my sanctuary, the one place where logic and competence reigned supreme. While he was trying to tear it down, I was reinforcing its foundations. I met with our key clients, reassuring them of the company's stability. I rallied our employees, who had long known who the true operational leader was. I worked with an efficiency and drive that surprised even myself. I was no longer just the coup. I was the sole commander holding the line. One evening, about 3 weeks after he'd left, I was working late in my office, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi Eliza. It's Chloe. I hope this is okay. I just wanted to see how you were doing." I stared at the message for a long moment. I hadn't thought about her much since that night. She was a casualty in a war that wasn't hers, and I felt a strange sense of responsibility for the fallout in her life. "I'm okay," I typed back. "Busy. Working. How are you?" Her reply was instant. "It's been a lot. I broke up with him. Obviously." The day after. "He didn't take it well. Called me a naive little fool for believing you." A second message followed. He was right about one thing. I was naive. I felt a pang of something akin to sympathy. He's a professional manipulator. "Chloe." He knew exactly which buttons to push. "It's not a reflection on you." "Maybe." She wrote. "I'm trying to see it that way. Anyway, the reason I'm texting, I might have something that could help you with the business side of things." My interest was piqued. "What do you mean?" He used to talk a lot. Brag. "Really?" About business deals. About clients. Sometimes he'd show me emails on his phone to impress me. I remember one conversation specifically. About a potential new investor. A big tech company. He said he was handling it all himself. That it was too high level for your side of the business. He was planning to divert the investment into a new, separate entity that he would control. He said it was his escape plan. The air in my office suddenly felt cold. An escape plan. A secret deal he was engineering behind my back, intending to siphon off a major asset before dissolving our partnership. It was more than just cheating. It was calculated. Corporate sabotage. It was theft. "Do you remember the name of the company or the investor?" I asked, my fingers flying across the screen. "I think so," she replied. "Let me check my notes." I wrote some things down after we met. I had a feeling they might be important. A few minutes later, she sent me a name, Aperture Dynamics, and the contact was someone named Julian Croft. The name hit me like a physical blow. Julian Croft. We had been in talks with Aperture for months, but Mark had told me they'd gotten cold feet, that the deal was dead. He had lied, sequestering our biggest potential client for his own selfish exit strategy. It was the ultimate betrayal, not just of me as his wife, but of me as his partner. He was willing to burn our entire empire to the ground, just so he could rule over the ashes. "Chloe," I typed, my mind racing. "This is more helpful than you can possibly imagine. Thank you. He deserves whatever he gets." She wrote back. "We both do." I put down my phone. A new, chilling clarity washing over me. The battle wasn't just about dividing what we had built. It was about stopping him from stealing what he hadn't. This information was the weapon I needed. It was the key to not just winning the war, but ensuring he walked away with nothing but the scorched earth he had tried to create. The image of myself from weeks Agath woman who stood frozen on a sidewalk, watching her husband share an acai bowl with a stranger felt like a lifetime away. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, and infinitely more resolute. Mark had tried to cast me as a weak and fragile character in his sordid drama. He was about to find out he had created a villain instead, and she was coming to collect everything he owed her. Chloe's text message wasn't just a piece of information. It was a lit match, and I was ready to use it to burn Mark's entire strategy to the ground. The next morning, I didn't just walk into my lawyer's office. I marched in, armed with a new, unshakable sense of purpose. The grief and humiliation had finally calcified into something far more useful: cold, hard resolve. He was building a lifeboat while planning to sink the ship. I told Sarah, laying out the details of Aperture Dynamics and Julian Croft. He was actively sabotaging our company's biggest opportunity for his own personal gain. Sarah's expression, usually a mask of professional neutrality, hardened. "This changes everything, Eliza," she said, her voice low and serious. "This isn't just a contentious divorce anymore. This is corporate malfeasance. It's a breach of his fiduciary duty as a partner. We're no longer on the defensive. We're on the attack." The legal battle that followed was brutal and swift. My legal team filed an emergency injunction, armed with the information from Chloe and bolstered by a deep dive into company emails and financials that uncovered Mark's clandestine communications with Aperture. We exposed his escape plan in excruciating detail in a court filing. It was a meticulously documented account of his deceit, proving he had deliberately lied to me about the deal status while secretly negotiating terms for his own benefit. The fallout was immediate. When confronted with irrefutable evidence of his duplicity, Mark's aggressive stance crumbled. His lawyers, realizing they were defending a losing position, quickly shifted from offense to damage control. The charming, confident rainmaker was revealed to be nothing more than a common thief dressed in a bespoke suit. He tried to reach me one last time. A single, desperate voicemail left in the middle of the night. His voice was no longer angry or pleading. It was hollow, defeated. "Eli, I never meant for it to go this far. I got in over my head. I don't know. I just wanted something that was mine. You were always so good at everything. I just wanted to feel like I was in control of something." I deleted the message without a flicker of emotion. His pathetic attempt at a justificationist, deep-seated insecurity was no longer my problem to manage or soothe. For 15 years, I had subconsciously made myself smaller in certain areas to let his ego breathe. I had downplayed my strategic wins, giving him the credit in public. I had propped him up, believing it was the foundation of a strong partnership. Now I saw it for what it was. I hadn't been supporting a partner. I had been enabling a child. His desire for something of his own was nothing more than a euphemism for wanting to win, without having to do the work. The settlement was far from the 50-50 split he had initially rejected as insufficient. Faced with the threat of a protracted and very public lawsuit over his fraudulent activities, he was forced to accept a buyout offer that was beautifully fair. I would keep the companion company, which would now be solely my company. He would walk away with a cash settlement that was a fraction of what he had demanded. His name permanently scrubbed from the door. He was excised, surgically removed from the life and the business I had poured my soul into. The day the papers were signed was gray and overcast, the Chicago sky the color of slate. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I just felt a quiet, profound sense of finality. I walked out of the lawyer's office, leaving the man I had spent half my life with behind for good, and drove not home, but to the lake. I stood on the shore of Lake Michigan, the wind whipping my hair across my face, and watched the massive, churning gray waves crash against the rocks. The water was restless and powerful, a force of nature that was constantly in motion, constantly changing. For the first time in months, I felt my own future stretching up before me, as vast and undefined as that horizon. The company was mine now, rebranded simply as Vance Events. The name felt right. It was clean, direct, and wholly my own. The first few months of running it solo were a whirlwind. I worked harder than I ever had before, driven by a need to prove mostly to myself that I could not only survive without him, but thrive. I reconnected with Julian Croft at Aperture Dynamics, apologized for the internal miscommunications, and, with a new, transparent proposal, I closed the biggest deal in the company's history. It was a victory that tasted sweet, not because it was a final blow to Mark, but because it was a testament to my own skill and resilience. One Friday evening, after a particularly grueling but successful week, I was packing up my briefcase when a text came through. It was from Chloe. "Hey, I know it's been a while. I saw the news about your company's rebrand and the Aperture deal. Congratulations, Eliza. You deserve it." I smiled. A genuine, unforced smile. "Thank you, Chloe. I actually owe you a big part of that. Can I buy you a drink to celebrate?" Her response was quick. "I'd love that." We met at a quiet, elegant cocktail bar in the Gold Coast. A place with dark wood and soft lighting. It was a world away from the trendy Akai cafe where my world had first begun to unravel. Chloe looked different. She seemed older, more poised. The youthful naivety in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet wisdom. We were no longer two women defined by the man who had wronged us. We were just two women, sharing a drink. "How have you been?" I asked, after we'd ordered. "Good," she said. And I believed her. I quit my job at the agency. Decided I needed a fresh start. I'm doing some freelance marketing now, and it's going surprisingly well. It turns out being ruthlessly deceived is a great motivator for becoming your own boss. I laughed. A real, easy laugh. I can relate to that. We talked for hours. We didn't talk much about Mark. He was a catalyst that had brought us together. But he was no longer the subject. We talked about our careers, our ambitions, our hopes for the future. I saw in her a bright, ambitious young woman who had learned a hard lesson far too early. She saw in me, I think, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side. Not unscathed, but stronger. As the evening wound down, she looked at me across the table, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said. For a long time after everything happened, I was so angry. At him, but also at myself for being so stupid. But sitting here with you tonight, I don't feel that way anymore. It was a horrible experience, but it led me here. It forced me to grow up fast. Pain is a powerful teacher. I agreed, swirling the last of the wine in my glass. "It is," she said. "And you know what else I realized? He tried to make us rivals. He created a story where one of us had to lose for the other to win. But he was wrong. We both won." I looked at her, this young woman who could have so easily been my enemy, and I felt a profound sense of peace. She was right. In his web of lies, Mark had intended for us to destroy each other. He had underestimated the power of shared truth. He had never imagined that the two women he tried to pit against each other would end up finding solidarity, and in doing so, find themselves. We walked out of the bar into the crisp autumn air. The city lights seemed brighter, the night full of promise. We said our goodbyes, promising to keep in touch. And as I watched her walk away, I knew our strange, unlikely connection was a testament to something powerful. It was proof that sometimes, the end of one story is simply the beginning of a better one. And for the first time in a very long time, I was excited to find out what the next chapter would hold. The months that followed were a quiet reconstruction. I wasn't just rebuilding a company. I was rebuilding a life. Plank by plank, nail by nail. The condo, once a shared space echoing with the ghosts of a 15-year marriage, slowly began to feel like mine. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls a calming shade of blue, and replaced her wedding photo on the mantelpiece with a striking piece of abstract art I'd bought on a whim. The home started to reflect the woman I was becoming, independent, focused, and unafraid of empty spaces. My work was my anchor. Vance events flourished under my sole leadership, free from the need to manage Mark's ego or clean up his logistical messes. I was more creative, more daring. We took on projects that were more ambitious, more innovative. My team, sensing the shift, responded with a new level of energy and dedication. There was a lightness in the office, an efficiency that hadn't existed before. We were a well-oiled machine, and I was firmly, confidently, in the driver's seat. I didn't hear from Mark directly, but I heard about him through the city's small, gossipy business community. The stories painted a grim picture. After the settlement, he had tried to start his own consulting firm, but his reputation was in tatters. The story of his deception, both personal and professional, had spread. He was no longer the charming rainmaker. He was a liability. Clients were wary, and potential partners kept their distance. The escape plan he had so carefully constructed had led him to a deserted island of his own making. One day, I ran into an old mutual friend at a coffee shop. After some awkward small talk, he hesitated before saying, "I saw Mark last week. He's not doing well." "Eliza, he lost a lot of weight. He asked about you. What did you tell him?" I asked, my voice neutral. "I told him you seem to be doing great," the friend said, looking at me with a mixture of pity and admiration. "And you are. It's amazing to see." I thanked him and left. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Not even a lingering trace of anger. His fate was no longer tied to mine. He was just a man I used to know, the protagonist of a book I had finished reading and placed back on the shelf. My healing wasn't a straight line. There were days when a wave of loneliness would hit me unexpectedly. A sudden, sharp pang for the companionship I had lost. Or rather, the companionship I thought I had. There were nights when I'd wake up from a dream of the past, my heart aching with a phantom pain. But these moments became fewer and farther between. I was learning to be alone, and discovering that I much preferred my own company to the company of a liar. I found solace in simple things. Long walks along the lakefront, the cold wind a refreshing slap against my face, rediscovering old hobbies I had let slide, like photography, spending quiet weekends with a good book and a glass of wine. With no one to answer to but myself, I was forging a new relationship. The most important one of all, the one with myself. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I was at a charity gala my company had organized. It was one of our biggest events of the year, held in the grand ballroom of a historic downtown hotel. Everything was running perfectly. The lighting was dramatic. The music was exquisite. The guests were happy. I stood in the wings, watching the culmination of months of hard work, a quiet sense of pride swelling in my chest. A woman I vaguely recognized, one of the event's sponsors, approached me. "Eliza, you've outdone yourself," she gushed. "Everything is flawless. You know, I almost hired your ex-husband's new firm for a corporate event last month." Thank God I didn't. I heard from a friend that it was an absolute disaster. The man has completely lost his touch. I just smiled. "I'm glad you're enjoying the evening." Later that night, as I was overseeing the breakdown of the event, I saw a familiar face near the coat check. It was Chloe. She was there with a date, looking radiant in a shimmering silver dress. She spotted me and her face lit up. "Eliza, I was hoping I'd see you," she said, giving me a warm hug. "This event is incredible. You're a rock star. It takes a village," I said, smiling. "You look wonderful." "Happy. I am," she said, and her eyes shone with a genuine joy that was beautiful to see. I learned a lot from everything. I learned what I won't ever tolerate in a relationship again. And I learned what I deserve. She squeezed my arm. We both did. Her date came over. A kind-faced man who looked at her with open adoration. After a brief, friendly introduction, they left, walking out into the night hand in hand. I watched them go, and I felt no envy. No sadness for my own solitude. I felt a quiet, happy contentment for her, for the resilience of the human heart. As I took one last walk through the now empty ballroom, the silence broken only by the clatter of the cleanup crew, I thought about the woman I had been a little over a year ago, the woman whose world had shattered on a sidewalk. She had thought her life was a perfectly constructed building, only to discover its foundations were made of sand. But she had been wrong. The foundation wasn't the marriage. It wasn't the partnership. The foundation was her. I was the foundation. And I had not just survived the collapse. I had cleared the rubble and built something new in its place. Something stronger. Something that was entirely my own. I walked out of the hotel and into the cool, crisp Chicago night. The city glittered around me. A universe of a million tiny lights. Each one a story. A possibility. My story was no longer a drama directed by someone else. There were no more villains. No more victims. There was just me. And for the first time, I understood that the greatest performance of my life wasn't about staging the perfect event for others, but about finally, truly, stepping into the spotlight of my own. I took a deep breath of the free, clean air, and I walked on.